All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome tonight to the fifth lecture in this series. I was reminded in putting on this microphone of a funny story that a colleague of mine had one time. He was teaching in one of these rooms, these Kane Hall rooms, and he had on his wireless microphone because he would move around a lot, and they had a break in the middle of the lecture, and he had to go to the bathroom. Okay? And he never turned off the microphone, right? And so he comes back into the lecture, and everybody is like just smiling and laughing at him, right? And that's like my worst nightmare right there, right? So, well, welcome tonight. Welcome tonight on what is a night, of course, with the Democratic Party presidential debate. So I appreciate you coming tonight. You can obviously record one of those and see the other one, this one or that. But I appreciate you coming tonight. Also, if you're open to making a donation in support of the work that you're going to hear about tonight, Common Purpose, would love to receive that afterwards. We'll do it at the table over here, and we'll make it as easy as possible for you. So thank you all so much. This is lecture 5 in this series, and I want to start with, what do I want to start with? I want to start with John Lewis. So John Lewis is one of my heroes, civil rights hero, but before that, just a simple country boy from Alabama who decided to go to college in Nashville because it was really, really inexpensive at American Baptist College, and met a whole host of others who would be part of the civil rights movement. And in Nashville in 1960, the Nashville group of leaders there, trained by James Lawson, Dr. James Lawson, staged a set of sit-ins in Nashville. And they were all prepared and ready to go. They'd been preparing for months. And then on February 1st, the sit-ins began in Greensboro, North Carolina. And the Nashville folks said, wait, we're ready to go too. So they did it shortly after that and began their sit-ins. And I want to start with Lewis, and I'm going to end today with Lewis as well. All right? And he had a couple phrases that really have stuck with me all this time. And I don't think that these probably originated with him. Like, we can look at these historically, but I know them from John Lewis. And he would say to folks, if not us, then who? And he would say, if not now, then when? All right? If not now, then when? And he would say these in the midst of planning, in the midst of disagreement, in the midst of uncertainty, in the midst of trying to figure out what to do. And this is a tweet from now Congressman John Lewis. And this is John Lewis in the middle, and they're coming out of McClellan's, which was one of the 2 key places they were sitting in Nashville, Tennessee. And he's coming out with a group of others, and this is a tweet from 2014. So obviously several years ago. And to me, I want to start here because what he said was my first arrest, February 27th, 1960 in Nashville, Tennessee. I felt free, I felt liberated, I felt like I crossed over. This sense of absolute freedom in the midst of tremendous risk and danger. And there's a paradox there that I've never lived into. I have never experienced the terror or the fears or the courage that these folks have. But that sense of paradox in the midst of the great tribulations and challenges and risks and danger, that in the midst of that we can achieve freedoms and liberation, is to me something I have been inspired by folks in the movement and try to carry forward and work today. The overview of the lecture series is this. You've been here or watched all of them. Started out with just an overview of kind of like what a demagogue looks like or sounds like. Then spent some time on 5 demagogues that I suggested paved the way for Trump and Trump picked up on. And then the last 2 lectures I've talked about 2 M's, mindset and message. Mindset being about the importance of preparing ourselves and also choosing courage. Like, it's got to be a choice. Message being the commitment to American ideals, that even though these ideals have never been adequately lived up to, and we may doubt them in deep, deep ways, nonetheless, they are powerful and they call to us, and they also call to millions and millions of Americans and billions of people around the world. Today I want to talk about mobilization, the body of work that we might call action, the taking of action. Okay? Mobilization, the something we can do. The something we can do terminology comes from a quote by Helen Keller that my graduate school advisor gave to me when I finished my PhD. And the quote goes like this: "I'm only one, I cannot do everything. But still I am one, I can do something. I will not refuse to do the something I can do." And that has sat on my bookshelf at the University of Washington for 20 years. It has been something that I have challenged myself with, challenged others with, and now sits on a bookshelf of mine at home as something that I look at when I'm doing work at home. What is the something we can do? That's a choice each of us has to make, but there are something each of us can do. So we start with our existential threat. I really wish I could stop talking about Donald Trump. I wish I could, but he is President of the United States, and he is an existential threat. And I want to take us back to 1989, 30 years ago, when there were 5 young men arrested in New York City and charged with assault, rape, battery of a woman in Central Park. These 5 were arrested. Eventually it was proven that they were not responsible, but they went to jail at that time. And Donald Trump, in the midst of their trial, or before their trial actually, shortly after they'd been arrested, ran this full-page ad in 4 different newspapers in the city of New York, in which he argues about the danger of crime and unfettered young men who are dangerous and should bring back the death penalty, support our police. This is who Donald Trump is. When someone tells us who they are, we have to believe them. This is who Donald Trump is. And here's what one of the young men, Yusuf Salam, who was 15 in 1989, speaking in 2016, said. Had this been the 1950s, that sick type of justice that they wanted, somebody from that darker place of society would have almost certainly came to our homes, dragged us from our beds, and hung us from trees in Central Park. It would have been similar to what they did to Emmett Till. And that is the America that Donald Trump talks about and means when he says, let's make America great again. That is what we're talking about here. That devastation, that desire, that hierarchy of pain. So Trump has been this person for a long time. And Trump in 2011 decides he's going to launch a mission to make the argument that Barack Obama is not an American citizen. And he goes on The View and sits where he likes to sit, right in the middle, and makes the case that Barack Obama is not an American citizen, that he wasn't born in the United States. He starts to argue about where's the birth certificate. He's already made this claim, but this is his national launch. It's like a campaign launch. And I have in previous lectures shown the clip because the clip gives us a real sense of the way in which nobody could stop him, like they feed off of him, that he feeds off of them. They argue, it's all fun and games. But I don't really have a stomach for it tonight. But he launched this intentionally in 2011, a campaign to take down the first black president of the United States, to make an argument that he was not an American citizen, an argument we've never, ever heard made about any previous president. And he got free rein in a national media forum with a lot of humor in this clip to launch this. In 2015, Donald Trump announces he's going to run for the presidency. He decides that he's going to run. He comes down the escalator in New York City and gives a speech about Mexicans as rapists and criminals. He's not, again, he is telling us who he is. Gives this speech, delivers it, and launches and immediately becomes the front runner in the Republican primary. It isn't like, hey, he got past this and then a month later he became popular. He immediately became the front runner. And the media's response, well, it was kind of like it was in 2011 or 30 years ago, like this guy is just fun and games. Like we shouldn't take him seriously, okay? So I do want to show you this clip. This is a clip of media response. It's a mashup of a bunch of different people on television kind of giving their reaction. Yeah, don't do this to me, man. I'm so excited, my video's embedded and everything. Was working. I don't think it's going to work. You know what I think I'm going to have to do? I think I'm going to have to restart my computer to get that to work.
Click on the YouTube link. Click on the YouTube, yeah. Oh, skip. Skip back.
There are no words. How do you even have a straight face right now? There are no words to describe what just happened.
Ed Rendell, do you have any doubt that this is anything more than a carnival show?
And you watch that speech today, we all laugh about it, and I'm sitting here laughing out loud, for the entire, front part of the show here as we're talking about it.
I mean, it was a rambling mess of a speech. That said, it was very entertaining. I was howling.
He's got gumudgeons of money, he's got a lot of recognition, and he just became the 12th presidential candidate for the Republican Party. Is it typical Donald Trump fashion, or is it hilarity run amok? This morning, some Republicans say they're worried Trump will turn the campaign into a circus.
Party leaders worry Trump's presence will turn the primary into a joke.
America's largest Latino civil rights organization called Trump an exceedingly silly man.
Donald Trump is a fool.
Hell froze over, and now we're stuck in the ice with Donald Trump.
Chuck, you and I have seen this public dance from Trump before. I guess the question is this candidacy for real? Will it be significant?
It's like I can't tell if this is politics or if this is just PR from a celebrity.
For the National Press Corps and other elites, Donald Trump's campaign is a pure vanity exercise and a target ripe for outright mockery or low-level derision.
Cut, done.
On the one hand, he's a late-night joke.
Finale, the most beautifully ridiculous jibber-jabber.
On the other, he's the proverbial skunk at the garden party. How does the Republican Party handle a political streaker who knows how to get attention?
Sadly, the biggest buzz surrounds Donald Trump. How to take Donald Trump? Well, consider the newspapers this morning, at least the tabloids. The Daily News considers Trump a clown. The New York Post considers Trump a rich guy who could make it to the White House.
I do not hate Donald Trump, but I do not take him seriously. I thought, everything that was garish and ridiculous about him was fully on display. Unconventional? Will people who love him love it? Yeah, but will it get him anywhere close to becoming the nominee or the President of the United States? I think not.
I think there is a vein for him to tap, and he's going to get some serious votes. He can't win, but he can get a lot of votes.
While no one expects Trump to get close to winning the nomination, that doesn't mean that they're happy he's in.
I mean, this is the problem with Donald Trump for Republicans. Of course, he's not going to win. He probably will make the main stage. He'll be one of the top 10 vote getters just because of name recognition and the obsession with stardom. The problem is he's going to be a flamethrower. He has nothing to lose.
But he says the most provocative things, like when Mexico sends its people, they're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people. What is your strategy, and how can you succeed when you say things like that?
Well, you can't, again, Gail, if the question is how can you become president, you can't by by saying things like that.
Can we stipulate for the purposes of this conversation that Donald Trump will never be president of the United States?
And so that's what happened. It happened all the way through. So we're here now, 2.5 years later, and in this lecture series I've been talking about how to make change, and I've talked about an arc of how change can happen and one way in which it did happen. And I've talked about a series of steps along the way that the civil rights leadership chose and then executed. These 7 steps. And I talked about the first 3 in what I call mindset. The gathering of information about what is the empirical reality, what are the goals that we're going to focus on, and we're going to nail them, and we're going to focus on them, and we're not going to take our eyes off of them. And then this moment where you have to choose courage. You have to choose. And then I talked about message, the importance of emphasizing national ideals, the ideals of equality and justice and opportunity and freedom and liberty, core ideals that are part of the American mythology and narrative. And tonight I want to talk about these 3, 5, 6, and 7, the acting on the plan, the 6th, the sustaining despite hardship, and the 7th, assessing and moving forward, what I call mobilization. None of these are easy, not the first 3 under mindset, not the middle one when there's so much doubt and question about who are we as a country, and not these 3 under mobilization. It's impossible for me to say with any kind of definitiveness which of those are harder than others. They're all hard. They're all really difficult. But I can say this for sure. That if you have number 1 and you have number 2 and you don't have number 3, we're not going to beat an American demagogue. You can't just think and feel certain things and say certain things. You got to act. So I'm here to say, as someone who spent 21 years as a communication professor and will always forever and ever think communication is really important, that I'm not really interested in what you think or what you say or what you feel. What I'm really interested in today is, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Despite the hardships, despite the needing to choose courage, all of this. What are we going to do? Okay? So mobilization tonight. John Lewis, one of his phrases also is that when we pray, we move our feet. When you come across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, there is a series of memorials and markers to folks who displayed courage on that bridge in 1965. And one of those is a memorial to John Lewis and Hosea Williams, who were the 2 people at the front of the march during March on Selma. And this phrase is at the bottom of that. When we pray, we move our feet. That faith is not enough, that faith entails action. So I want to talk about acting on a plan, sustaining despite the hardships, and assessing and moving forward. And when you act on a plan, the keys to acting on a plan is that we need time and treasure. We have to make choices about time and treasure. When we're talking about sustaining despite hardship, it's we decide to be in community in the midst of difficulties. And 7, when we assess and move forward, it is a sense of what is the purpose that calls to us that leads us from those actions to the next action. What is it that keeps us going to the next thing? Despite the hardships, despite the need for courage, despite the doubts about our country. It is a sense of purpose, a belief that there is something that is essential for us to be committed to. And having done some things in life that have a sense of purpose, and having done a lot of things that don't have a sense of purpose, it is a profoundly different experience when there is a sense of purpose. A sense that I stand in the flow of history and have a purpose that is larger than me. Does not make me special, but it does require that I respond to that sense and decide if I'm going to act. So I want to give you a sense of what this could look like. This lecture is going to have more clips than usual because I'm trying to show you this stuff in action. What does it look like for purpose? What does it look like to act on a plan to sustain despite hardship? What does it look like to assess and move forward, even despite that number 6, to move forward to the next step in the journey? This gentleman over here is Mark Kelly. Mark Kelly's running for the Senate in Arizona, the U.S. Senate. Arizona is one of the states that this organization, Common Purpose, that I'm working as part of, is committed to working in. We worked in Arizona in 2018. We'll be back there in 2020. And one of the major reasons we'll be back there is to hope to help Mark Kelly to win his race in the Senate. Mark Kelly is married to Gabby Giffords, Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, who was shot. Pretty much assassinated, but didn't die, thanks to the courage of an intern on his first day on the job, who came over and wrapped her head in not a bandage, but in some kind of scarf to hold the blood there. A 21, 2, or 3-year-old intern. All right? Giffords is alive, but she struggles physically in many different ways. We'll see her in this video. But together, Kelly and Giffords have a purpose. That purpose has been around gun safety and advancing democracy. So this is the launch campaign ad for Mark Kelly. About a year ago. He's an astronaut. He went into space. That's all I know. So he went into space. Yeah. Something. I mean, like, going to space, what else do you need to say? I mean, if I was 30 years younger, it'd be like my ultimate pickup line, right? Like, hey, I'm an astronaut, all right? So I want to show you not the whole clip.
So you're seeing that sunrise from space for the very first time.
But I want to jump forward here a few seconds. I don't think I'm going to be able to. It was so close, and it was playing, and I fucked it up. Do you know, like technologically, when you're challenged and you're so close, and then you're not? All right, this is him. He's a twin. Okay, so this is his launch video. It's a couple minutes long, but this picks up the point.
And we learned a lot from my mom. She became a police officer in the 1970s. And I remember my mother trying to figure out how she was going to pass this physical fitness test. It was a hard test. It was designed for men. But that did not deter my mother. When she finally took the test, instead of getting over in the required 9 seconds, she got over 4.5, much faster than almost all the men, and became one of the first female police officers. My parents taught my brother and I the value of hard work. I always knew that I was going to serve this country in some way. I flew 39 combat missions in Operation Desert Storm over Iraq and Kuwait. By the time I met Gabby, I'd already flown my first 2 flights on the space shuttle. You remember when you first entered Congress for the first time?
Yeah, so exciting.
It was exciting. You know, I thought then that I had the risky job.
Yes.
Turned out that you were the one who had the risky job.
911, where's the emergency?
A gunman shot Arizona Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords and several others today at an outdoor event in Tucson, Arizona.
I remember the first time I saw her. You know, within minutes, a bloody tear coming down her eyes. She didn't even look like her. You know, but it was her. One thing I realized early on was, you know, that Gabby needed me to help her through this. She needed an advocate. And the thing I have to do for my wife is to be able to think clearly and make good decisions. You really lost your life serving your country.
Yes.
But what do you do when bad things happen?
Move ahead.
You gotta move ahead.
Yes.
You gotta move ahead and try to make a difference in the world. You ready?
Let's go.
We're gonna go 100 miles?
101, no.
How far do you wanna go?
5 miles.
You know, I learned a lot from being an astronaut. I learned a lot from being a pilot in the Navy. I learned a lot about solving problems from being an engineer. But what I learned from my wife is how you use policy to improve people's lives. Arizonans are facing incredibly challenging issues here in the years to come. Access to affordable health care, the stagnation of wages, job growth, the economy. As the climate warms, we're going to have more drought here in the desert. Solving some of the hardest problems requires one thing, and that's teamwork. Hey, partisanship and polarization and gerrymandering and corporate money have ruined our politics, and it's divided us. I care about people. I care about the state of Arizona. I care about this nation. So because of that, I've decided that I'm launching a campaign for the United States Senate. We've seen this retreat from science and data and facts. And if we don't take these issues seriously, we can't solve these problems. We're going to need to bring people together from all parts of the state and all walks of life. So please join us. And the torpedoes.
Full speed ahead.
So the pieces in Mobilization are about acting on the plan, sustaining despite hardship, and then assessing and moving forward. The only thing I think that can carry you through that is these items: time and treasure to act, community through hardship, and purpose to keep moving forward. Because it is a reality that if you're going to have a sense of purpose in politics, you're going to lose a lot. You're going to lose a lot. So I heard this great stat when the Seattle Seahawks played the Los Angeles Rams on Thursday night 10 days ago. I saw this stat because I happened to be watching the game. It's not like I like sports or anything, but I happened to be watching the game. And they showed a stat on television about Russell Wilson. And the statistic was this: the percentage of winning, the winning percentage for Russell Wilson in games after a loss is 80% for him. Loses, wins 80% of the next games. It's the highest in the history of the NFL. Okay? It's the highest ever for a quarterback. Wow. About that ability to pick oneself up. Get up off the deck and come back and try again the next day. I have circled time and treasure because this is where I come in. And this is where people come in. We can't do 6 and 7 without 5. It's an arc. And the arc stops at 5 if we don't do 5. If we don't commit time, like time in which you decide to leave a job, or if you don't commit treasure, such as resources. Resources can be a lot of things. They can be money. They can also be intellect. They can be networks. But if we don't commit those at this moment in time, then we don't even get a chance to sustain despite hardship, and we don't get a chance to keep moving forward. This is the moment. And so it is this moment that led me 3 years ago in 2016, when I didn't know who was going to win the presidency, but I knew we as a country were messed up, that it was time for me to leave the University of Washington as a full-time professor. And I feel scared about that. That has been my career and my home forever. But hell, if there's ever going to be, in John Lewis's words, if not now, when? And if I don't, in a position of privilege, make some of these choices, then who's going to be able to do them? I have a responsibility. So we started an organization called Common Purpose. I went around to some people I really trust and also am inspired by and said, hey, would you join me in this endeavor? Some of them were easier sells than others. And they got on board to volunteer and be part of this. And we launched it in March 2018. And we had a really simple goal. Not easy to necessarily deliver on, but a simple goal, I think. We wanted to take people, move them through an experience where then they would do two things, the action being the key thing here. Voter registration and voter mobilization. Important to get people registered to vote and then get people out to vote. And we wanted to take people who are frustrated, scared, angry, and give them a pathway to this work. Because you never know why someone wins an election. It's too complicated. The network, the puzzle pieces are too many. But we know for sure, without voter registration and voter mobilization, that you will, without those, you will lose. We don't know that these are the difference makers to win, but we know without them, you will lose. And it's messy, and the return on investment is difficult, and people slam their doors in your face, and they say, why are you calling me? And all of this, it's all good stuff. It's all fun. All right? But when you register someone to vote who didn't know they could register to vote, and they can't believe it, and so they argue with you and say, I can't, and you say, no, you can. Let me hear. I just want to help. You change their life. You give them a chance in a way that they didn't have before. Or when you help someone to cast a vote for the first or for the 50th time, the reality is that you empower them, we engage them, we mobilize them, we give them a chance to make a difference, to be part of a system that they are within. So we want to create this little system. And I like to try to build things. That's what I like to try to do. And so we decided that we would try to build this. And we thought, well, what needs to be part of this system? And we came up with 4 things that we thought needed to be part of this system. 1, we needed to build a sense of connection and community to each other because we think this work is too hard to do by ourselves. We get discouraged. We also get lonely. And we don't have all the information and knowledge that we need. So we need a sense of community. We needed to identify locations. Where should we work? Where should we do this work? What makes sense? If we were going to do those things, where should we do them? We need to formate teams. I made up that word. We need to formate teams. This is forming teams, but it's a very active thing. We are in the process of creating and trying to, with these teams, to build them, to mesh them. That's challenging stuff, right? In the movies, it's nice and sweet. The band comes together. It's all solid. But in real life, it's challenging. And then we needed to learn fieldwork. How would we do this? Every state has a different voter registration model. Every single state has a different voter registration model. So if we're going to do anything outside of the state of Washington, we're going to have to figure that out. And there's going to be an awful lot of people, hopefully, who would be over here, who would have never done anything over here, done any of this. And so they're going to be like, how do you knock on a door? And isn't this going to be really scary? And yeah, it is. It is, just like it's really scary to make choices, to choose courage. It is. So we set out to do this, and in building community, brought along some stellar folks who led us through some conversations and put us through some exercises, and we had some food and beverages, which always helps, right? Next time we're going to start straight with alcohol, all right? It's something I've learned from colleagues, to start with that. And we had regular workshops where people would come together and talk to each other. And we started this in March 2018. And then we said, wait, where do we want to do this work? Well, we need to do this work in Washington because we're here. And even though we do live in a fairly progressive bubble here, the reality is that even within that bubble, there are challenges. And around that bubble, there's lots of challenges. So we need to start in this state. But we said, wait a minute, let's go other places where there's really competitive elections too. So we went to Florida. And we went to Georgia. Tried to help Stacey Abrams win the governorship. And we went to North Carolina and Pennsylvania and Ohio and Michigan and Wisconsin and Minnesota and Nevada and Arizona and eventually Texas, because we wouldn't have competed in Texas, but Beto O'Rourke was doing so well, we've got to give it a shot. So we never did anything like this before. I've never tried to put this together. I'd never done any door knocking in my life. But there was this great team. And so we started to put it together. And to form our teams, we would identify key congressional districts in every one of those states. The ones that are really competitive. Like, if these are key competitive states, within those states, there are also really competitive areas. And we would have state team captains who would lead teams out there to these states, so that we wouldn't just say to you, go, we'll see you later. But we would say, like, hey, we're going on a 3-hour cruise. Right? How many of you know that reference? Okay. We would have captains take us to these places, and we would build real partnerships and links to organizations in every one of these states. We had no desire at all to show up and try to know what we were doing. What we believed is we could bring people, and we would have partner orgs tell us what to do. Partner orgs would tell us what to do. And at first, when we would call them up and say, we'd like to come, they'd say, why? I had the same conversation with somebody in Kentucky just last week. Why? Well, we have a body of folks here who would like to make a difference, to try to support in a very important election, and they'd like to come. Okay, once they kind of get over the doubt of that, then the next thing they say is, we really would like you to come if you'll do things the way we tell you to do them. Okay, all right, that's a deal. We will. So we follow the lead of partner organizations, which actually is the model of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee back in the 1960s. Their greatest impact was to have people in communities who would lead. People from out of community were welcome to come in and support and help, as long as that's what they were doing. And so we would link to organizations in North Carolina, in Arizona, in Wisconsin, in Ohio, and so on. We built connections with partner orgs. The captains in each state, they were the ones that did this. This is tough stuff. It's complicated. And they went to key congressional districts, and we traveled to all these states in 2018. And before we go, and then when we'd arrive, we had trainings about what to say, trainings about how to walk, trainings on apps on your phone, trainings just to how to do this. And it is scary, it is nerve-wracking, it is challenging. And again, I'd never done it before. And I also know that once you do it a couple times, it's kind of like a drug. Okay? It's kind of compelling. And actually, the good and the bad go together. It's like the sweet and sour. Like, they go together. Like, you want some successes, but you also, I don't know if you want, but the challenges make it part of it real too. So we did all this. And frankly, I don't know how we did. There were, at our height of engagement, about 25 volunteers leading this shit who were not getting paid. We eventually raised some money to pay them, but they were doing it because they cared. They wanted to make a difference. And they did it because they believed in it. And they believed in me, and I also believed in them. So we did this. And I just want to give you a sense of some of our results. So I want to compare across a series of the states that we went to and the places that we invested, results from 2016 to 2018. And I'm not going to go through all those states, but I want to name a few of them. And they're not all just the best ones. We didn't win in all of them. And these are not an apple-to-apples comparison, because in 2016, the numbers I'm going to show you is the numbers of people who voted for Trump or Clinton, and they weren't on the ballot in 2018. But I'm going to give you the best, highest level race in 2018 to compare in those states, to give us a sense of what can happen when people bust their ass in all of these partner organizations and people act. They mobilize. So in Arizona in 2016, Donald Trump won by 91,000 votes. In 2018, Kyrsten Sinema won by 55,000 votes. as a U.S. senator, the first Democratic senator in a couple decades in that state, and it's going to be the second one in 2020. In Nevada, Hillary Clinton did win there in 2016 by 27,000 votes, but our team that went there, the Democratic governor, the first Democratic governor to win in that state in about 25 years, won by 39,000 votes, and we flipped a Senate seat, and we elected the first female majority legislature in the country in history. And we got automatic voter registration at the initiative level adopted. And any one of those will get me up in the morning the next day. Any one of them. In Florida, Trump had won by 112,000 votes. That number is like written on my arm because I want to beat him in Florida so badly. And we went there in 2018, and he wasn't on the ballot, of course, but we went there to work for Andrew Gillum, who was running for the governorship. And Gillum lost. The Republican governor won by 32,000 votes. There hasn't been a Democratic governor in Florida since the 1980s. And Gillum almost won. Almost won. But you know what else happened in Florida? We were part of passing Amendment 4, which provided the right to vote again to formerly incarcerated citizens. It needed 60% of the initiative ballot in the state to pass, so it wasn't just a majority ballot, it was an initiative that required 60%. It got 65% of the vote, all right? We were part of that. I'm gonna take that one all the way. And the Republicans have tried to make it more difficult since then, but we're not quitting, all right? In Georgia, Trump won by 211,000 votes in 2016, and Stacey Abrams lost the governorship on the Democratic side. Brian Kemp won the Republican nominee won by 51,000 votes. Stacey Abrams won more votes than any Democratic candidate statewide has ever won in the state of Georgia. An African-American woman in that state. We will be back there in 2022 if she's not vice president before then. Okay? Well, we're going to be back there in 2020. They have 2 U.S. Senate races. 2. Right here. This guy right here is our Georgia team captain. All right? Okay? You want bang for your buck if you work for us? In Georgia, there are 2 U.S. Senate races. All right? In Pennsylvania, Trump, to the deep humiliation of the Democratic Party, Donald Trump won Pennsylvania by 44,000 votes. And our team was there in 2018, and the Democratic governor won by 855,000 votes. All right? All right? We're responsible for it all. I'm just kidding, okay? In Michigan, Trump won it by 10,000 votes. My home state. Crushes my soul. My county, Wayne County, which is a suburb, which is Detroit plus some western suburbs, was the key county in which turnout dropped dramatically from 2012 to 16. That's the county I grew up in. Trump wins the state by 10,000. We go there, and the Democratic governor wins by 406,000 votes. And we helped to pass a series of voter reforms against gerrymandering, same-day voter registration, no reason absentee balloting. You can take an absentee ballot at any time. We helped to flip 2 congressional seats. In Minnesota, Trump had lost. Clinton had won by 43,000 votes. And in 2018, the Democratic governor won by 295,000 votes. And 2 U.S. senators were reelected. And in Wisconsin, Donald Trump had won this state. It is the closest competitive state in the country. Florida gets a lot of attention because it's always close, but in sheer numbers, Wisconsin is the closest state out there, most likely coming up through 2022. Trump wins it. That's the McCarthy state, right? So we shouldn't be stunned. George Wallace got 33% of the vote in the Democratic primary in 1964 in Wisconsin. It is one of the largest white working class populations among the traditionally blue or purple states in the country. It's a competitive state, a very, very competitive state for Donald Trump. In 2018, we went there and we didn't win everything, but the Democratic governor beat Scott Walker by 29,000 votes, all right? So I appreciate that because I'm fired up about it, and I appreciate your enthusiasm too. And so, you know, if we weren't in it for the whole arc, we could have stopped. It was a good run. It was cool. It was fun. Nobody made much money off of this, but we got to contribute to something. But actually, we made a different decision. My colleagues over here and some others, we made a different decision. We made a decision to actually charge forward. All right? And so we built or launched, to use Mark Kelly's verb, and he's got to use the verb launch, okay, when he talks about his campaign. I mean, that's only good, solid communications. You're launching a campaign. We launched Common Purpose 2.0 in January of 2019, and a couple colleagues joined. We built a team. They're here. You'll get a chance to meet them later. They left jobs to become part of this. And there might be this tendency at some moment in the narrative or in the structure of this, because I've been giving these talks, there might be this tendency to think sometimes that people joined my team. No, I'm on a team with them. Okay? That's the reality. We are on the team together. And we started to build 2.0. And we decided, what's the thing we do that is gonna, like, you know, every great company or organization has a thing that they do. And what we do is civic fieldwork. Primarily voter registration and voter mobilization. And we say, if we're going to do it, we got to surround it with community, because we want to sustain in the tough times. Because they're here now, there's going to be more. So we started to build workshops and build a sense of community. And people who come and do work with us, there's a significant body of folks who come and do work with us and travel with us or do work in the state of Washington who want nothing to do with community. They want to do the work. They want to knock on doors, voter register, and God bless them. We get that. But in our body of work, we've got to spend some time together, because we don't believe that you'll come back the next time and do this work if we lose, unless you have community. So we believe in that. We're committed to that. And one of our favorite moments is when folks like that, who kind of grumble at first when we say, let's talk to each other. They kind of grumble. But then, by the end of the workshop, or by the next workshop, or after a trip out there, they're the ones that are bringing 3 other people. And we have a phrase that people come for the work and stay for the people. And that starts with the leadership of this, but it also infiltrates throughout the body of folks involved. So we started to build this. This is our bullseye. This is our eyes on the prize. Civic fieldwork, surrounded by community, where people build teams. They get to know each other. They travel. They drink alcohol together. They do things together. All right. Recently, unexpectedly, they went to an erotica poetry slam in North Carolina. Okay. All right. This was not planned. They went out for some fun to a poetry slam, but they did not know what the theme of the evening was. All right. And when the ceremony person kind of came out and said the theme is erotica, they all kind of like look like this. But I wasn't there, but I'm kind of sad, okay? But had a great time together, all right? So that's our slogan, come to us. No, it's okay, it's fine, okay? So we wrap ourselves in community. And let's just be direct about this. Community ain't the easiest thing. We like to think it is. And we use that word very positively. But community is really working through and standing together and picking ourselves up. And on election night of 2018, the initial results, I really wanted to win the governorship in Florida. We weren't going to win it. And I was really down about that. I had been there. I'd worked. And I really wanted to beat a senator in Indiana as well. And we lost badly there. The Dems did. And so I was really down. But then folks like the leadership team and others started to pick me up. All right? And so we have a community. Now, we have 3 things that we've developed that feed this. I'm coming close to the kind of like final portion of the lecture. We have 3 things that feed this. We have moved some terminology in our own work around at different times, but this is the gist of it. We believe in education, like this, and workshops. We believe in what we call an organization called Leadership Lab, which will bring in youth between the ages of like 18 and 23 or 24 to learn what it's like to engage in civic work from one of my colleagues, AJ Musewe over here. She will head up leadership. She is heading up Leadership Lab. And then we have an idea accelerator, which is the development of ideas. Like maybe we could build an entire program like we're talking about, like everything I've just said to you, maybe we could build it and target purely millennials. Well, they don't come along as easily. They're like a four-leaf clover when you're talking about like civic fieldwork. But that's an idea, and another colleague of mine, Charles Douglas over here, has gone and made that happen. We're going to have about 20 people go to Virginia in 3 weeks, all millennials, doing this work. All right? How can we do that? Leadership like that and resources from people like yourselves. So these are our pieces all feeding civic fieldwork. And I alternate between absolute certainty and confidence that we got this and absolute terror and fear that we're going down the drain. And sometimes I text my colleagues and I'm like, we're going to kick his ass. And other times I'm like, holy shit, I'm worried, right? But I know this, again, what I know is if we don't do the work, we've got no chance. I don't have a guarantee that the positive will occur, but I have an absolute guarantee that if we don't do this, the negative will occur. All right? So the organization, and I've given you information on already, is called Common Purpose. That's our website, CP Now. And the reason it's CP Now instead of cp.org or commonpurpose.org is because there's an organization in the UK that's named Common Purpose. It's not us. We've gone to a number of events where people are like, yeah, I've been reading up on you, all right? And they're fairly controversial. So we have to like debunk that right off the bat. That's not us. We're a body of folks. And the title itself, Common Purpose, comes from two places. It comes from Van Jones, a commentator who has worked on the left and the right politically in this country, worked with Trump on prison or incarceration reform, Trump, and was in the Obama White House. Okay? He's worked on both sides of the aisle. And he has written a book called Beyond the Messy Truth, How We Came Apart and How We Come Back Together Again. And he starts the book by saying, look, I've gone all over this country for the last couple of years. He's from Tennessee, spent a lot of time in Chicago, travels around. And he says, what I see when I go around the country is what he calls common pain. See, common pain. There's pain over health care. There's pain over opioids. There's pain over fears about jobs and economic dislocation. He says, but what I don't see is a sense of common purpose. All right? Common purpose. And so in our dream world, this notion of common purpose will be completely 100% pan-partisan. It will be supporting anybody who's committed to a just and inclusive democracy. And so that's our goal, that's our desire. But right now, we only find one political party that offers that. That is a reality. There is one political party that is trying to make it easier to vote and to build a more inclusive country. And there is one that is making it harder to vote and is also fighting against the inclusivity that is defined or could define in our best moments this country. So we work on behalf of Democrats, and that's all we've done so far. But that may not be the case in years to come. We'll see where we're at. The second place this term comes from, common purpose, is from, it's not from him, but is aligned with Cory Booker. So Cory Booker's running for the presidency. We don't issue endorsements in common purpose of candidates, but if there was anybody on pure like ideas and words, we would endorse Cory Booker because he talks about common purpose a lot. All right? And so this is his campaign announcement video.
In America, we have a common pain, but what we're lacking is a sense of common purpose.
What's up? Amen.
that the only way we can make change is when people come together. When I was a baby, my parents tried to move us into a neighborhood with great public schools, but realtors wouldn't sell us a home because of the color of our skin. A group of white lawyers who had watched the courage of civil rights activists were inspired to help black families in their own community, including mine. And they changed the course of my entire life. Because in America, courage is contagious. My dad told me, boy, never forget where you came from or how many people had to sacrifice to get you where you are. So over 20 years ago, I moved into the Central Ward of Newark to fight slumlords and help families stay in their homes. I still live there today, and I'm the only senator who goes home to a low-income inner-city community, the first community that took a chance on me. We are better when we help each other. The history of our nation is defined by collective action, by interwoven destinies of slaves and abolitionists, of those born here and those who chose America as home, those who took up arms to defend our country, and those who linked arms to challenge and change it. I believe that we can build a country where no one is forgotten, no one is left behind. Where parents can put food on the table, where there are good-paying jobs with good benefits in every neighborhood, where our criminal justice system keeps us safe instead of shuffling more children into cages and coffins, where we see the faces of our leaders on television and feel pride, not shame. It is not a matter of can we. It's a matter of do we have the collective will, the American will. I believe we do. Together, we will channel our common pain back into our common purpose. Together, America, we will rise. I'm Cory Booker, and I'm running for President of the United States of America.
So I want to bring it home. So how to make change? I've talked about 3 M's: mindset, message, motivation, mobilization. I'm inspired to come up with the 3 M's from a civil rights hero that I've had the chance to get to know in Selma, Alabama, Miss Joanne Bland. And she was 15 years old when she walked across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in 1965 as part of the Bloody Sunday March. And she spends time with groups that come to Selma and gives us her history and her tour and tells us about those experiences. And she talks about the 3 M's that Dr. Martin Luther King used to bring whenever he'd show up. King almost never started a campaign. He would come in after it was already started. He would arrive, and this was part of his gift and part of the tension that he would come in. But he would bring 3 really crucial things. He would bring media, he'd bring money, and he'd bring motivation. And those were incalculably valuable to the movement. He did the things he could do. He was not an organizer. People would do the organizing, and he would show up and do what he could do. I don't have those 3 M's. I have mindset, message, and motivation. But they do help me to remember them. Remember, I try to come up with interesting acronyms or with consistent letters to start. And in the ARC, I want to talk about the Freedom Riders of 1961. I want to start with mindset. The Freedom Riders were a bunch of really smart young people who decided that they had seen enough about segregation and racism in this country, and they wanted to do something about it. They were primarily young people in the U.S. South, at a variety of colleges or working in different places. They had decided and watched and seen things, and they saw the sit-ins in 1961, and some of them were part of the sit-ins, but many of them weren't. They saw the sit-ins, and they decided that it was time for them to act. It was time for them to do something. So then they decided, what's their goal going to be? What are we going to do? Well, in 1947, there was a U.S. Supreme Court decision which had ruled, U.S. Supreme Court, which had ruled that interstate bus travel in the United States that was segregated was unconstitutional. It was against the Constitution to have segregated bus lines. So after that, interstate bus travel in the United States should have been desegregated, but it wasn't south of the Mason-Dixon line. It wasn't. It was still continued to be segregated because the federal government was afraid to kind of intervene in this in the South. In 1960, the U.S. Supreme Court revisited that court decision and ruled that not only does it stand today, actually the bus terminals in which buses land in and take off from are also should be desegregated according to the U.S. Constitution. So in 1961, the Freedom Riders said, let's pick up something that happened in 1947 when a group of people decided to take a bus tour across the Upper South to try to desegregate the bus lines. It was called the Journey of Reconciliation in 1947. The Freedom Riders in 1961 said, let's do something like that. Let's take these interstate buses across, down to the South, and let's go into bus terminals, and let's sit down at lunch counters and eat and use the restrooms in a racially integrated way. And this is what they were going to do. This was the goal. Pretty, simple's not the right word, pretty bounded goal. This is what they were going to do. And they believed that doing it would bring media attention, would bring inspiration, and also maybe would force the federal government to act. So they decided that that was the goal that they wanted to do. But they knew that if they did this, there was a very high likelihood that they would be badly beaten and possibly killed. Actually, probably killed. So the folks who started the Freedom Riders were CORE, the Council on Racial Education. Racial Equality. Yeah, Council on Racial Equality. And they are the ones that started the Freedom Riders in 1961, and they had a policy that anybody under the age of 21 had to get a parent to sign off that they could go. So I've had the great privilege to spend some time with a guy by the name of Dr. Bernard Lafayette. And Bernard Lafayette wanted to go on this bus tour, but he was 18 years old, this bus trip. So he had to send his permission slip to his parents in Florida, and they didn't send it back. And so Bernard tells the story of calling them up and saying to them, Mom and Dad, I sent you this. I need you to send it back. I want to be, he's living in Nashville, Tennessee. I want to go on this. And the mom says, hang on, your dad wants to talk to you. And the dad comes on the phone and he says, I am not signing that document. I am not signing your death warrant. And so he didn't send it back. So Dr. Bernard Lafayette doesn't go on the first set of freedom rides. But a group of other people do. And they decide that they're going to choose courage for the good of something bigger than them. And so they decide to do this. Okay? Now they name themselves the Freedom Riders. They could have named themselves a lot of things. The Freedom Riders. That is a core American value built into the name of the entity. The Freedom Riders. I have talked to strategists from the movement, and they said we generally had a 2 or 3 phrase term to refer to the campaign that we were interested in. And we tried to invoke certain values in those 3 words. The Montgomery bus boycott. They said we knew we didn't have a lot of time to communicate our message, that nationally you needed something short, and you also tried to get a sense of kind of like what's going on in a short amount of time. They named themselves the Freedom Riders and decide to get on the bus. And when they would get off the bus, they would inevitably get interviewed at places before things go really bad. And they would talk about the desire of America to live up to the Supreme Court ideals, to the Constitution, to the value of what this country could be. Okay? And then they had to act. And so they did. One more thing under number 4, national ideals. They decided they'd leave from Washington, D.C., the heart of the country, the capital. And they would drive 18 days and arrive in New Orleans on May 17th. May 17th is the day of the year that the Brown v. Board of Education court decision was decided. And they wanted to bring attention to this, desegregation and they wanted to emphasize the kind of notion of America standing up for what's right. That was the plan. They have to act. So they take off from Washington, D.C., they go north a little bit into Virginia, into Pennsylvania, and then they turn back down into Virginia and they come south. And they are okay for a couple days. But then they arrive in Rock Hill, South Carolina, and they come off the bus and they're badly beaten. John Lewis is knocked out. He's got to be treated for medicine. In a hospital. There's no black hospital there, so he has to go into the community to be treated. And they face their first significant, at least on this experience, hardship. Lewis gets back on the bus. They keep going, and they go to Georgia. So they're going down, they go through South Carolina, they go over here to Georgia, and they meet with Dr. Martin Luther King in Georgia. And I know this is a long story, but these are my heroes. They meet in Georgia with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in Atlanta, because that's where King is. And King says, you need to stop. You're gonna get killed. And that will hurt the movement, actually. Don't do it. And they responded, come with us. And King said, I can't. I'm on probation. If I cross state lines, I'll go to jail. And this was the beginning of a rift between King and these young militants. Because we're putting our body on the line, and you can't break probation. But he recognized his role in this movement too. Like, he needs to be out there bringing the 3 M's. But they go to Alabama, and indeed the bus is bombed. They throw Molotov cocktails, the Klan throws Molotov cocktails onto the bus. They barricade the door so you can't get out. But the explosion knocks the door off and breaks the windows. And so all the Freedom Riders don't die. They're severely injured, they don't die. And the next bus, because there's 2 buses, goes around them, goes into Birmingham, and they're met by the Klan as well. They're badly beaten. So they're all now in Alabama, in Birmingham. They're badly beaten. They're devastated, and they decide to call off the Freedom Rides. Corps does. They're done. They are at maximum hardship. They have almost died. Their leader, or one of them, Dr. King, has said, don't continue. They're at maximum hardship. And Corps says, we can't ask these people to do this anymore. And so they stop the Freedom Rides. And back up in Nashville, there's a group of folks who had been part of that John Lewis group, who had sat in 1960, who said, we're coming. So they got on the bus, their own bus or their own car, and came down to Birmingham and said, we're relieving you and taking over here. And so they picked up the Freedom Ride community, one to the next. They picked it up. They rode along the next phase. And when they got to Montgomery, Alabama, they were just destroyed, badly beaten, devastated. Lewis is left for dead in the middle of the street. Jim Zwerg, a white German guy, an immigrant, white German guy from Wisconsin, is absolutely bloodied and devastated. And every indication is that they're just devastated and they're not going to continue. And as one of the civil rights heroes of mine, a guy by the name of Bob Zellner, said, Zellner wasn't part of it, but he was living in Montgomery. He went to go visit Zwerg at the hospital, and he said, really, you've got to stop. And Zwerg said, as soon as I'm better, I'm getting back on the bus. Okay? Well, all this hardship, all of this eventually leads them to get to Mississippi, and they're thrown into Parchman Prison, which is this devastatingly brutal prison. They're thrown into Parchman Prison because the Mississippi governor has struck a deal with the Kennedys in the White House, and the Kennedys want no more violence, and they say, if you arrest them but not be violent, we'll let you arrest them. And so governor of Mississippi arrests them, puts them into Parchman Prison, and the Kennedys, who want nothing to do with this, think it's over. Okay? But it's not. And I want to show you a video clip. And this is where we're going to end today. thought I had this opened, but we'll get it.
So-called freedom riders.
Yep, so this is right where I want to start it. This is Bobby Kennedy talking about, hey, you should stop.
Who are making these trips accomplish a great deal. I question their wisdom. I don't question their legal right to travel, but I question their wisdom. I think that some people can get hurt, innocent people that don't have anything to do with this.
Bobby Kennedy hoped that he could go to the Freedom Rider leaders and say, look, I've made this move. Those signs are going to come down eventually. Why don't you call off the Freedom Rides?
Robert Kennedy calls for this cooling off process, and the Freedom Riders say no. And in fact, they pick up the Freedom Rides. They intensify the whole project, and they have people coming in from all across the country to participate. And they're coming in by plane, and they're coming in by bus, and they're coming in by train.
Well, as this train rolls on toward Jackson, Mississippi, do you have any second thoughts with regard to this effort you're taking?
No, none at all. Even though we came from many different places and we had many different cultures and many different home environments, in some ways we were very much unified because we had a common cause and we were all moving in that direction, and we did believe in what we were doing. We knew that we had taken a stand and that it was going to be better. There was something better out there for us.
What made you want to take part in this?
I want to help break down this barrier of segregation.
How about you? Can you give me any of your feelings on why you want to take part in this?
Well, I want to help establish the right of all Americans to eat together and to travel together.
Why do you think it's your responsibility?
I think it's every American's responsibility. I only think that some are more conscious of their responsibilities than others.
Eventually, there were over 430 Freedom Riders, 300 of whom ended up at Parchman. At Parchman, they began to see the movement in a new way. It became almost a university of nonviolence. They became not just individual groups of Freedom Riders, but they had a shared experience. And they were from different parts of the country, there were different races, different religions, in some cases different political philosophies, and it all got blended together. They became tougher. They became even more committed. They became the shock troops of the movement.
The people that took a seat on those buses, that went to jail in Jackson, that went to Parchman, they were never the same. We had moments there to learn, to teach each other the way of nonviolence, the way of love, the way of peace. The Freedom Ride created an unbelievable sense, yes, we will make it, yes, we will survive, and that nothing but nothing was going to stop this movement.
Finally, on September 22nd, after hundreds of arrests, the ICC issued its order. It gave the Freedom Riders what they've been asking for. The colored-only, the whites-only signs that had been in the bus and rail stations for generations, they finally came down. This was the first unambiguous victory in the long history of the Civil Rights Movement. It finally said that, we can do this. And it raised expectations across the board for greater victories in the future.
I'm taking a trip on the Greyhound bus line. I'm riding the front seat to New Orleans this time. Hallelujah, I'm a traveling.
Black folks always lived in fear of white folks. And now they're seeing young people define white people. And so we help to get rid of that myth of impotence
I walked in Montgomery, I sat in Tennessee, now I'm riding for equality. Hallelujah, I'm a-traveling, hallelujah, ain't it fine? Hallelujah, I'm a-traveling down freedom's main line.
They understood that the only way it could be done in America is through peaceful methods. And the Freedom Rides illustrated that. The people who got beaten did not strike back. The people who got beaten did not have weapons with them. It was just a stroke of genius.
The Freedom Riders introduced the notion that there were fair-minded white persons who were willing to sacrifice themselves, their bodies and their lives, because they too believed that the country had an obligation to uphold its constitutional mandate of liberty and justice for all. And I think it opened our eyes so that we didn't paint all white people with the same broad brush.
A great change is at hand, and our task, our obligation, is to make that revolution, that change, peaceful and constructive for all. Those who do nothing are inviting shame as well as violence. Those who act boldly are recognizing right as well as reality.
There's no question that Kennedy was changed by the Freedom Riders. There's a direct line from the Freedom Riders to the speech that President Kennedy gave in June of 1963, calling on Congress to pass legislation to get rid of Jim Crow and to give civil rights protection to all citizens.
It was America. It was interracial. It was interregional. It was secular and religious. It brought together people of different political philosophies. There was a sense of unity and purpose that I'm not sure that the movement ever had before. It was a shining moment.
Hallelujah, I'm a-traveling, hallelujah, ain't it fine? Hallelujah, I'm a-traveling down freedom's main line.
That's a Freedom, a PBS documentary. If you want to watch it, it's spectacular.
What's it called?
What's that?
What's it called?
Freedom Riders documentary. Okay, so just my last slide here then. So they did what they could do, the something they could do. It wasn't an argument about like winning a legal case. It wasn't a high-level research argument. It was, we're going to get on a bus and travel to the south through the most violent parts of this country, and we're going to do it. So, how do you beat an American demagogue? There it is, right there. Those 7 steps. We know what the hell's going on. We've got enough information. We need to be laser focused on our concrete goals, which is to win the presidency and to win the U.S. Senate. Laser focused. We have to choose courage. For some people, that is really the most unbelievable courage. And for others, it's just the psychology of figuring out, of trying to do something that you've never done before. I don't denigrate either of those or prioritize either of those. The reality is that it's a courageous decision. It's choosing the path less traveled. We have to choose to emphasize and believe in this country. Otherwise, why would you even bother with elections? Why would you even bother? We have to act on our plan We need to be laser focused in making it happen. We need to sustain despite hardship. We were recently, this body of folks was recently in North Carolina, and we didn't get the outcome we wanted. I'm going to be going to Kentucky in a few weeks here to work on a governor's race. That's a tough state. Okay? Sometimes things don't go the way we want when we're out in the field, not just electorally, but interpersonally. We have to sustain despite hardship, and then we're going to assess and move forward. That's what we did after 2018. That's what we're going to do after the elections of 2019, and that's what we're going to do after the elections of 2020. And we will be going forward, always. Fannie Lou Hamer, American hero of mine, 5'4", strong woman, said, I've got to paraphrase, don't have this one memorized. I'm only 5'4", but I'll tell you this, if I fall, I'm going to fall 5 feet 4 inches forward. Okay? So this is us today, but it's also the U.S. today. This is where we are. This is what I'm committed to. This is what some incredible colleagues that I work with are committed to. This is what some of you in this room have participated in and will participate again. I'm here to invite you. In fact, I'm here to recruit you. Harvey Milk would go around in 1975 and say, I'm Harvey Milk and I'm here to recruit you. I'm here to recruit you. If not now, when? And if not you, I'm going to change Lewis's words. This is somewhat sacrilegious. I'm just going to say, why not? Okay? We need your support. We need your time and treasure. My colleagues, we're going to stand up here, and there's going to be a couple people over here at this table who can take contributions if you have them. If not, that's fine. It's fine. There are a lot of different ways to contribute. But you can make financial contributions over here. We need you to fill out a little form for us so that we can just have information, because we have to report your contributions to the Federal Election Commission, which is completely dysfunctional and it doesn't have anybody who's running the damn thing, but we still have to do it, okay? And then there'll be a couple more of us over here who will be happy to answer questions. And would you guys join me up here, please? I'm going to flip on the lights all the way here. These folks are the Freedom Riders. They are. They are. They're challenging and making decisions and putting their lives on the lines in ways that I, as a white guy, can only theoretically understand. Okay? I am forever indebted and honored to work with all of you. Yeah. Here, can you guys just introduce yourselves?
Wale Akinlasotu, branding, marketing, and millennial efforts. That's what I work on.
Hey everyone, Maria Abando. I am the Common Purpose Development Manager and Iowa State Lead for 2020.
Hello folks, I'm AJ Musewe. I head up Youth Leadership Development.
You didn't take this in the bathroom, did you? The mic?
No.
Charles Douglas, I do branding and marketing, and also we're headed to Virginia with some millennials soon.
Larcy Douglas, I'm the operations manager, and I make sure that we all adhere to all the fiduciary responsibilities for all the donors that we have in our community, and I'm also the Colorado State Captain.
And I'm David Domke. I do civic education and fieldwork, and I'm a Kentucky State Captain for 2019 and 2020. Thank you. And there's at least 2 in this room that are coming with me to Kentucky. So if you want to go, it's still open for 3 more days to sign up, so you can talk to me. So Larcy and Maria will be over here to kind of handle donations. Wole is here as a Georgia captain, branding and marketing. AJ is a Virginia captain and heads up our youth leadership, our leadership lab. Charles heads up our millennial effort. She's a Virginia captain as well. Charles, a Wisconsin captain, millennial efforts, branding and marketing. We'd love to talk to you. Thank you so much, okay?